So, hello and welcome to another episode of the Journal Links podcast. Or welcome back if you've been here before to get everybody up to speed. This podcast is for journalists, bloggers, podcasters, or anyone similar to tell their own stories. My name is Conor O'Brien and I'm a journalist. I run Courageous Nerd, entertainment and pop culture website, which features interviews with actors, writers, and filmmakers. Joining me for this episode is Harry Stedman. Harry, how are you doing today?
Well, I'm very well, Connor. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. Yeah, and we were saying a bit before we started this recording that obviously, we haven't seen each other in quite a while, and it's nice to catch up.
Yeah, it always is. It's always a pleasure to see you, Connor.
Oh, and likewise, lovely to see you as well. I suppose just to kind of set this up for anyone who hasn't come across you before and want to be familiar with like who you are, just kind of give a brief snapshot. And obviously, I imagine we'll get to know you as this conversation goes along, but just to set you up a little bit and give people a bit of an insight.
Sure. So I am a general news reporter at PA Media, which is the UK and Ireland's national news agency. I've been a general news reporter not for too long, for about 2 months full time now. Prior to that, I was an apprentice at PA Media, which is where I met you when I got enrolled onto the PA training
Mm.
course about this time last year.
Hmm.
So basically, in my role, I can be reporting on just about anything, to be honest. My agency covers everything from court cases to sports fixtures, royal engagements, exhibitions, openings of new places of interest, and then everything in between really. So
Mm.
it offers a lot of variety, and I'm always writing about something different each day. It's a job
Sure.
I really enjoy, and it's been a really ideal uh, entry into the world of journalism for me.
Brilliant. Yeah, and obviously you mentioned we met on the PA training course. Yeah, and as you say, about this time a year ago, we were about like a week and a half off from starting. So that's mad how long how quickly time has passed in that sense. But actually, a bit of a unique aspect for you and I is that before going in, I knew of you, but we had a mutual friend who had also done the course, Jonathan, who by way of moving around. He went to uni with both of us at two different unis. So I suppose I mean, obviously you're already with PA as an apprentice, but was he a helpful resource to you, kind of telling you what the course would be like? Because I know certainly he was for me. He kind of gave me a bit of a rundown before I started, but how was he in that aspect for you?
You know what? It's funny you say that because I've got a lot to thank Jonathan for because he was a really big driving force in trying to help me
Mm,
apply for things a lot earlier in 2022, in the first half of that year when
yeah.
I wasn't in journalism. I was trying to find my way into it, and
Mm,
he was really helpful in terms of giving me a steer as to where to apply for things, and the fact that I needed an NCTJ diploma
yeah.
to sort of find my own way in the profession. Um, so obviously, when I told him I was doing the course, he was pleased. He was really pleased for me. And
Mm,
obviously, when I did finally start it last September, it felt like a big step because it's something that all journalists talk about and all companies talk about in terms of
yeah.
having NCTJ and all the bits and bobs that come with it. I
Mm,
mean, you'll know as well as me all of the different aspects that we had to learn and
yeah.
how in depth it can go into certain things. But he was a really positive influence and a huge help for me. And as you'll
Yeah.
know, he's a lovely lad
He
anyway.
is, yeah. A lovely guy. Yeah, and actually, when I met him, he was a politics student, and I guess he was at my uni for a year, and then he moved on to your uni, and I guess somewhere in that time he must have changed his mind about what he wanted to go into. But no, yeah, lovely guy, and yeah, just as you say, just really helpful. Well, clearly to both of us before we started. So yeah, shout out to Jonathan if you're watching this. Thank you very much. But yeah, I suppose because I'm thinking back to that first day, and I remember obviously I knew your name. I didn't know which one of the guys you were, but okay, I'll try and figure out which one is Jonathan's mate, and then once I figure out who it is, because I went up to you and said, oh, I know Jonathan. Like I know once I figured out who you were, I mean, it was a nice icebreaker because okay, we know somebody in common. It's a small world, and that's helpful, I think, in the industry we're now both in. Connections, I think, go a long way. Personally, I don't know about you.
Yeah, and as you say, it was a very nice icebreaker, and for me, I was a bit all over the shop on that first day anyway because I
Mm.
was rushed around, and I remember getting the underground, getting off at Bank Station and being at least 5 or so minutes late, and I
Oh, really? Okay.
yeah yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
and then I sort of ran up into the classroom, and everybody was already seated, and
Wow. Okay. Yeah, yeah,
I was a bit flustered, and sweat coming
yeah,
down my face.
yeah.
All these new faces looking at me. I had distinctly had school and university vibes about it.
Yeah.
But no, yeah, like you say, it was nice to find common ground with someone so quickly.
Mm.
And as you alluded to, that the fact that we have that common connection and that contact in the world of journalism already is such a huge help going into it, because it
Yeah.
helps you understand from the get-go that, like, although it is a bit of an old adage and it's an expression that people probably
Mm.
overuse, it is about what you know, but a lot of the time it's about who you
Who
know
you
as
know?
well.
Yeah.
And Jonathan being at the Evening Standard helped me understand that, because he helped open doors for me that
Yeah.
gave me access to new stories and new information.
Mm. Yeah, no, I mean, I was going to say I had a bit of a similar thing to you on the first day because I mean I didn't get there as late as you, but before we were seated, obviously if you remember the layout, we were in that outside bit where we would have had lunch. That area, everyone was standing there. I remember me and one of the Bloomberg apprentices, we shared the lift up, and we literally came around the corner, and just like you said, everyone just all eyes were on both of us. We're like, I mean, yeah, and obviously we got there on time to go into the classrooms, maybe not as intense as what you described. But I mean, yeah, it was definitely kind of like literally just washed over you like all these eyes and yeah, no, but I think overall we had a really nice group. Personally, I think anyway, a really nice bunch of people.
We had a fantastic group, and everybody was, well, I'd say the vast majority of people were all very committed to learning everything, understanding everything properly,
Mm.
because they were all really genuinely interested in pursuing a career in journalism. And
Yeah,
when you break it down, it's a pretty interesting thing to get into.
it is. Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so yeah, definitely lovely, lovely people.
yeah.
And as far as I'm aware, they've all gone on to, forge out their own little careers in
Paths.
the
Yeah,
industry.
yeah.
Starting out. So
Yeah, and obviously I managed to catch up obviously with a few in previous interviews, and everyone I've spoken to so far seems happy with where they're at the moment, which I guess that's what you would have wanted once you finish the course and whatnot. But yeah, I suppose going back to your journey and actually obviously so once Jonathan had steered you to where to apply, and once you find yourself in a position, okay, you're like joining PA, like so when you were joining, like, how quickly did they kind of say to you, okay, listen, you have to do this course? Like, was that quite early on, or like, did you have any kind of like stint there at PA before you did the course? Or was it literally you joined and then you were at the course right after?
so I knew it was a 2-year apprenticeship, with the first 6 months being allocated for that PA training course.
Yeah,
My start date was some day in August, near the end of August last year.
yeah,
And as a means of getting me used to the office and sort of getting to grips with the company a bit, I spent a fortnight in the PA offices prior to starting the course,
mm,
which I think did me, an absolute world of good, because
yeah,
I instantly got to know faces, and people started to recognize who I was, and I was able to introduce them, explain to them
mm,
what I was doing. So when the time came to, for me to go back to PA on Fridays and spend one day a week working on different desks,
yeah,
they were already quite in tune to what I was doing, and who I was and what my aspirations were. So I
mm.
think in that sense, in terms of getting to know people face to face, it was really beneficial.
Yeah, I mean, this is quite exciting actually. Just something I remembered because when I spoke to Ruben, who was also at PA, I remember in his interview, I was saying to him, "Oh, I'll ask Harry about this if he's ever on." So I'm excited to be able to follow that up. and I think you and I had opposite kind of revelations, and this might make sense in a second. So until Jonathan kind of mentioned what the course entailed, I was unaware of like the apprentice aspect, that there'd be people who were affiliated also in it. And I remember quite early on, like we were having a drink, I think, after one of the evenings at the course, and you said to me the opposite, where you thought it was just going to be apprentices, something like that, or maybe it was just the size that surprised you. I'm not sure which one of those is exactly accurate, but it was something to that effect, I think, right?
What in terms of our like cohort, the size?
Yeah, yeah. So I think either you said you thought it was just going to be apprentices, or the number of people took you by surprise. It was one of those two, I think. You said to me quite early on, but yeah,
I think it might have been the apprentices line, because
yeah,
obviously I had no idea coming in. I thought, um, there's going to be all these people with all these different media companies, all coming into
yeah,
one space and being told to go there to essentially do the course so they can go
mm,
back and have it rubber stamped, and the companies don't have to worry. But having got there and seeing that people were doing it off of their own back, it was really interesting to see, and it was also quite refreshing because again it re-emphasized that sort of
mm,
passion that people had for it, because the course if you're not getting it funded by a company, it's quite a lot of money to pay out.
yeah,
So for people to make that commitment and want to choose
mm,
journalism, feel like that's the right path for them, it was really great to see.
yeah, yeah. I mean, certainly, and I think at the end of the day, in the long run, the mix kind of helped, because I feel like at some point, that the difference in situation almost became not irrelevant, but you kind of didn't really think about that in those terms after a while. It's just like, oh, that's just Harry, that's just Jamel. It's not, oh, that's Harry from PA, that's Jamel from PA. Everyone just kind of was on equal footing in some sense. And then you might occasionally remember, oh, yeah, they're already at whatever place, but it wasn't like a bone of contention, or like it wasn't like, okay, like that's their side, this is our side. It was very much a united group, which again was a lovely thing to have.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
Brilliant. Yeah, I suppose, in the time since you, because again, during the course anyway, we started, rather, the apprentices started going back to their companies. You would have got some stories under your belt around that time, so a couple of months into us doing the course. So I guess from then until now, has there been anything that stands out? Any stories that you've done that particularly memorable to you?
Oh, that's a very good question.
Mm,
So when I first went back to the offices, uh, when I was still doing the course, I suppose the one that stands out for me is the very first sort of articles I was doing.
mm,
Yeah, I was started on the entertainment desk, and they got me doing
yeah.
album reviews. So I'd be there with a set of cheap headphones on, in the middle of an office, surrounded by
Yeah.
all of these elderly, more experienced colleagues,
Mm.
jamming away, listening to music, all this new music that was yet to release, and then
Yeah, yeah.
typing down a few sentences of
Mm.
artistic critique, which I wasn't used to doing,
Yeah.
but was highly enjoyable. And I remember one of the deputy editors coming over a couple of weeks afterwards and being like, "Oh, did you check if you were in print or not?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And they were like, "Well, there's this website where you can check if you're in print." And he got it
Mm.
up, showed me the clipping of my album review in like the
Oh,
Yorkshire
nice.
Post or something like that, and I was
Mm.
I was over the moon. I was so happy.
Lovely.
So yeah, those first ones were quite memorable. In terms of more recent ones, since I've been back working there full time, ooh, I went to a Red Bull job at Red Bull
Mm.
Racing headquarters in Milton Keynes.
Yeah.
There was a stunt that Red Bull were undertaking with this famous BMXer,
Mm.
um, and I got to go along to the launch of the event. They created a 90-minute film about the whole stunt and how it was created and how the process of getting it organised and done.
Right.
So I got to go into the Red Bull Racing headquarters, saw all of the Red Bull cars from the last 15, 20 years, spoke to some really interesting people, got to interview the BMXer, Chris Kyle. Yeah, that was a superb job. And it was one of the first instances where I was doing an evening shift, so it was also quite new
Sure,
for
sure,
me in
yeah.
a sense like that. I found myself working at my laptop in this place that was miles away from where I lived at like 10 o'clock at night. So
Mm,
it was a challenge as well as a exciting thing to do.
yeah.
Um, yeah, and then I got to follow the Princess of Wales around on a couple of occasions.
Yeah.
Where Kate does a lot of
Mm,
official openings for like new art galleries or museums or reopenings. When they've
yeah.
got refurbishments, and I've managed to do that on a couple of occasions, and to be up close to like someone who's one day going to be queen of our country
Mm,
is quite a special thing to do.
yeah.
It also requires, it's one of those jobs where it requires a lot of your own work. So
Mm,
there are obviously press releases that are given out, but a lot of it is listening out for little interesting details or funny moments that might be gone in an instant. But if you see it and you capture it and you can
mm,
include that in what you're writing, it becomes a very original and nuanced piece of work. So
yeah.
yeah, those are also very, very enjoyable.
For sure, yeah, and just kind of picking up something you said, and just kind of relevant, but you mentioned, Kate Middleton, and it brings me back because obviously I mentioned this in other interviews on this, but in our first week, that was during, well, that's the week the Queen died. She died at the end of our first week, and I
Mm-hmm.
mean that'll be a thing going forward. Just generally, like how did you get into journalism? I mean, what a story to kind of have in your back pocket the first week of training was the death of the Queen, and I mean, we kind of like did a simulation of how we would report it. I think to remember did the exercises, and then that was the same day we were due to go to, I guess, where you now work, the newsroom, and that's been a cool story I've been able to tell. I've met other journalists, and they were saying when I was at PA training, we were due to go to the newsroom, but we got told there was this huge national event. They couldn't tell us what it was when we were speculating, obviously, what it could be, and that was one of the guesses, and unfortunately ended up being the correct one. But I mean, that's a mental thing to look back in hindsight, like, wow, like, we were kind of right there in it as this major thing was unfolding. Like we were in closer proximity than the average person would have been, as that story would have come out.
Yeah, trial by fire, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So we had the death of the monarch, we had the change of prime minister,
right, yeah,
we had the whole mini budget fiasco.
mm,
We had all these hugely significant
mm,
moments in modern British history,
yeah. I
all
mean,
condensed into a short period.
yeah, I mean, even like maybe other end of the spectrum, but Matt Hancock being in I'm a Celebrity, that was another one that broke while we were there.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, which yeah, I'm sure, like that in political history that might be significant in the long run, but yeah, no, yeah, no, it's mad actually how much coincided while we were training, and it's a nice point of reference, in terms of how was your training like? We can kind of say, well, actually, this is kind of the stuff that happened while it was happening. And I think the trainers, to be fair, were able to use some of that to inform what we were doing. They were kind of able to tie it in, or this is what people would be doing, covering something like that. Obviously, what's happening, and we're teaching you about it. Like it's probably what they're doing right now in the actual newsrooms, and it's kind of another way of letting us know like how certain things work. To kind of worked in that in our favor in a weird roundabout sense.
it also made it more current, I think, Connor, more realistic. Do you know
Yeah,
what I mean? Being able to draw upon real world events that were taking place made it more akin to what me and you now experience in terms of
right.
working, with a media company and having to do things and going through the processes.
Mm.
It was really good. It was in the long run, it's helped inform my work massively now. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I will say, just to answer my own question, but it's just a story that I did that sticks out, and it's very recent, and it's a bit of a roller coaster up and down. But I'm trying to think because I know there's a couple of people on the course who were from Hertfordshire. Were you one of them?
I was indeed.
Okay, then this kind of ties into that then. So, I live in kind of a coastal-ish area in Essex, and there was, or rather, I live near this area I'm talking about. But a boy from Hemel Hempstead and his dad had come on holiday to this area, and the boy was really into fossils and finds this hugely rare, very big shark tooth. And it's like, wow, like people going crazy for it, and it reaches us. We do a story. Then a press agency, I guess, kind of like PA, reaches out to me and says, "Oh, this is incredible. We'd love to syndicate it." So it gets to like the Express and the Eye and a bunch of other papers like that, only to turn out that the tooth was just a cleverly crafted like tourist souvenir that someone had obviously just lost, and this kid had just happened to have found it. Somehow went unnoticed for a little bit, but then eventually someone was like, "No," and if you look at this, it's not a real tooth. But after all of that, and that was how it ended, unfortunately. But I mean, that was a very much up and down situation that I had a little bit of a role in. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely, mate. And it's very, very up and down, very fast moving and can be unpredictable at times, can't it? So,
Yeah, oh, for sure. And I've asked people this, or who've spoken to already, because obviously, while we're all, I guess, share a similar job title and being journalists, we work for different companies who work in different ways. So, what would your general day to day be like when you go into work?
so it varies depending on what shift I'm doing. But
Mm,
if we were to go with the shift I did today, which
right.
was starting at 8 a.m., I'd get into the office, which is a stone's throw away from Paddington
Mm,
Station,
yeah.
uh, at around 8 a.m. Get to my desk, open up all my emails, my work email, my Microsoft Teams, check if I have any messages or outstanding
Mm,
emails from press agencies who are offering maybe embargoed stories or stories that may have came in overnight that could be to do with the day ahead. Um, get a cup of coffee,
mm,
and
yeah.
then
Essential.
there's a morning meeting which all the editors take part of, and while that's taking place, I keep on doing some more, routine checks and emailing other colleagues and such if I've got a job to go to. Um, and then if I do have a job that I'm getting sent off to,
Mm,
like I did this morning, then I'll
right.
receive the email and get myself ready, pack myself up, and get out of the office again to the
Mm,
location. So it's very you've
yeah.
got to be ready to drop everything at a moment's notice.
Do you drive as a matter of interest, or do you get the underground or a bus? Like, how do you get from the office to wherever you're being sent?
I wholly commute via train at the moment,
Okay,
unless somewhere's within walking distance.
got it. Yeah.
I more often than not get the Underground, the Elizabeth Line, National Rail, depending on
Mm,
where I'm going.
yeah.
Um, and if a bus is, the quicker way, or it's maybe perhaps somewhere that
Yeah.
isn't reachable by tube, then I'll get the bus.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I seem to remember because like, while we were doing the course, like you were still living in Hertfordshire right at the time, and
Mhm.
are you still doing that commute now, or have you made the move into London at this point?
No, I am. I'm still living in Hertfordshire.
Okay.
Still doing the commute. Um, I'd love to be able to say it gets easier, but it doesn't.
Mm, mm,
um, no, it's fine. I mean, it's about an hour. So
yeah.
it gives me a bit of, in the mornings, it gives me a bit of time to wake up
Mm,
before I get into the office. But it also, when I come home, if I manage to get a bit of space to myself on the train, then it gives me a bit of time to sort of debrief and think back to myself. Have I missed anything? Is there anything that I've forgotten to reply to during the day?
yeah.
Um, and if that's all done and sorted, then listen to some music or
Mm,
read the Evening Standard, which I usually pick up most evenings on the way
yeah.
home.
Mm.
So
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure about you, but I feel like we did a lot of like as I said, scenario based things on the course, and I found a lot of that coming around now in doing it for real. I'm like, wow, like I mean, because I think at the time it's things like even talking to the police to try and get comment on the phone, and you kind of think, well, how often would I have to do this? And as it turns out, quite frequently I'm talking to members of the police to get a comment on a situation, but I mean, have you found yourself using skills we learned in real life? I mean, I imagine being at somewhere like PA, and considering we were trained at PA, you must have a lot of transferable, skills taken from the course into now, right?
absolutely, and I use it what in one one skill or another I use most days. Whether that be interviewing people face to face, or having to knock on doors and speak to people, or getting in touch with press agencies, or as you say, police forces, and getting comments. I'll give you an example. On the morning it was announced that Paul O'Grady died,
Yeah.
I got sent down to his outside his house,
Wow. Okay.
sort of check and see, mop up any fans sort of tributes in terms of
Got it.
flowers being laid, or
Yeah.
well wishers coming along and giving their thanks. And it was his house was remote in remote Kent, in the middle of absolutely nowhere.
Right. Right.
And I had to, knock on all of his some of his neighbours' doors and speak to them. Got a few of their words, tributes to him and their thoughts. And then, as people came and went, a pile of, flowers and stuff built up. And then there was a really strange thing that was left. It was like a bag of doggy biscuits, because obviously,
right, yeah, the connection with him and dogs, yeah.
And I didn't have any, professional photographers with me, or any video journalists with me, which is often the case when you go to jobs in London. So I had to take everything myself. So I took an image of it, used it, framed it correctly, made sure everything was in shot, and everything we were taught on the course in terms of words, etc.
Joe was his name, right? He came in to teach us that.
Turns out my article ended up getting syndicated to most major places, because I was the only reporter down there.
Wow.
And my photo was used as PA's best of the day.
Oh, brilliant. Well done.
I was pretty chuffed about it. But it's, like you say, using those transferable skills that we learn, and you have to use them more often than you realise.
Because again, definitely there's like things what we did. I'm like, okay, I mean, I can see value in it. I don't think I'll ever have to use this particular thing. And it's like, oh, no, here it is. I mean, I've told the story before in the other interviews, but literally on the first day of the job I'm in, there was two senior colleagues. There was some legal story, and they were trying to debate whether it was absolute or qualified privilege. And I'm like, that's mad. I mean, I've been hearing those phrases battered around for months, and literally I'm here day one, and here they are. It was insane. But I'm actually really curious then about the Paul O'Grady thing, just because, if memory serves, that was quite sudden. Obviously, he wasn't particularly old, and he hadn't disclosed, that he was, unwell or anything like that. So I imagine on your end, that must have been quite an abrupt thing, or Paul O'Grady started to get someone down there. I mean, I can't imagine there'd have been much of advanced warning to try and be close to, So I mean, how would that have worked on the day? Did you just have to? Was it a mad rush to get there once the news had broke?
Yes. So I think I was starting on a normal shift, and I got into the office, did my routine that I was just describing to you, and then the editor came over, just swiveled over in his chair, and said to me, "Look, we're going to send you down to Kent. Go and get the train from St Pancras International. Go down to Ashford, and if you have to get a couple of Ubers, we'll expense them. Just try and make your way there and get there as fast as possible, because we want to be able to get that,
of course,
that instant access straight away. We want to be that company who, gets that original article, that niche aspect, that colour that no other company would be able to achieve, because they're busy doing other things or typing up tribute articles from a desk." And it was good, because I do that a lot of the time in my role. I am sort of flung somewhere at the drop of a hat, and as frantic and daunting as that might sound to people, I've found it's one of the best ways to learn. And it also makes one day to the next extremely exciting. Not coming to work and not knowing what you're going to do or where you're going to go. Some of the time, not all of the time, but some of the time that is the case, and it just it's great. You get to explore new places, see people you never thought you'd see, and the best part about it all is that you get to see your work at the end of it published. So
oh, for sure. And I suppose, like, on the flip side, when it might be something that's more anticipated, like I mean, it's like, say if you knew that like the Kate Middleton was going to be visiting somewhere, and you had that knowledge in advance, you might want to send someone to get pictures of that. I imagine, as I say, on the flip side, there'd been a lot of preparation to get somebody right there at that moment to be able to be there to cover it. I would guess.
Yeah, huge. There's a lot of huge operational preparation that goes along in the background for those sorts of jobs.
Mm.
I was fortunate enough to go up in an RAF plane for the King's coronation.
Oh wow, yeah.
And there was a lot of thorough checks and background checks that had to be done for that because, I was supposed to be going over in the coronation fly past in this plane, but weather permitting, I wasn't able to do it. But it was still a fantastic experience. But anything royal related or royally connected, there's a lot of background work goes into it behind the scenes, and
Yeah.
you're the lucky people who get to just turn up and say I'm here on behalf of so and so.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. No, I mean it's been a really cool thing actually since the course ended. Like, I've definitely been with people like just scrolling through Twitter and I see like a story and like, oh, I know them. Like, I was on the course with them. I mean, even if it's like our course mate Josh, who's with Sky, and like, there was something of like him trying to get something from a politician, like trying to get answer a question. And oh, I know him, or even as you've described with the stories that you've done. Oh, I know Harry personally, and it's like that's really cool to see. Actually having the face and the knowledge of the person as well as the reporting. It's really nice to have that full picture. Just for me personally, though.
yeah, and you alluded to social media just then. Like, I've always been quite reluctant to post a lot of things and share a lot of things on social media, but
Yeah.
it's such a enormous asset for us as journalists today to make use of social media and get your work out there and spread it as much as you can, because the more people who see your name and read your work, the more familiar you become to a wider audience.
Yeah.
And hopefully with that, more respected and more credited in the profession, which is all we want, right?
Yeah. And obviously, as people become like grow more of a tenure in their chosen field of journalism, right? Oh, that's this is Harry. He's or I really like Harry Stedman's work in the news reporting, and there's plenty of examples that you could probably rattle off where they're really well known in their specific field, and that's what they've become known for. So if you see their byline, okay, I can trust what I'm about to read or digest here because I'm familiar with this journalist, and that's what I think. As you kind of say, is what we all strive towards, to have that trust placed in us by potential readers or potential people engaging in what we put out.
Absolutely.
Oh, for sure. And I suppose just to kind of go back in time a little bit. So normally I say a year ago, but a year ago, obviously, we were quite close to the course. I suppose going back further to start of last year, as you were saying before, you entered journalism. Before you had that nudge from Jonathan to kind of know where to look. Like, what would you say to that Harry who didn't really know, where to start? Like, obviously compared to where you are now to where that past Harry was, those that quite a long time ago at this point. Obviously knowing what his mindset would have been like, what would be the advice you'd give?
I'd say to him, always be open-minded,
Mm.
uh, always be curious about things, probe things, take every chance that comes your way or is offered to you, or at least investigate it thoroughly.
Mm.
Um, persevere. Perseverance is so key in journalism.
Yeah.
If you don't get heard the first time, ask again,
Yeah.
because a lot of the time it gets missed under all of the mountains of news and words and stuff that's happening.
Yeah.
And I suppose back yourself, have faith in your own ability to produce engaging pieces of work that people are going to read and
Yeah.
people are going to rely on to get their news.
Mm.
Because it's when you go through the education system and you do all these essays, you do all these things, there's going to be a good writer in there. Some people might not have gone to university, but regardless,
Yeah.
if you want to be a journalist, you must have some sort of inkling that you enjoy writing, you're good at it, and
Yeah.
people find your work readable.
Mm.
So back yourself, have confidence, and just enjoy it as well. Like, obviously, talking to this previous version of me, he wasn't in journalism yet, and he was
Yeah.
absolutely clamoring to be. But I would just say to him, any chance you get, write something and enjoy it.
Yeah.
Because like I said, it can all change in an instant. So
Yeah, I mean, I think, for this industry, there's a saying in life, but I think it definitely applies here. Like, if you don't ask, you don't get. And, in that sense where, if you don't try, it doesn't happen. You can't just be sitting around thinking, oh, one day, the dream journalism opportunity will just happen to me. Like, you kind of have to put yourself out there, put yourself in that field to try and, make it happen. And, like, even I remember, I think when we're finishing the course, I can't remember the exact wording, unfortunately, but someone who was in our course group was saying, after we finish, it might take a while to get to like that dream spot, you fully want to be in, but without, actively trying to get yourself there, then it probably won't happen. You can't just expect things to fall into your lap. You need to actively work towards getting there. And obviously, you mentioned with the social media, that's a key component of that. You need to work yourself to get to where you want to be. And, without going for those opportunities, even want to get into journalism in the first place, then it just doesn't happen. You need to put in the work yourself to make it happen. Personally, as well, I think.
yeah, and I couldn't agree more. Half the jobs I've done, well, not half, but a substantial amount of the jobs I've done at PA or been fortunate enough to cover, I wouldn't have covered if I hadn't raised my hand or sent an email to my editors,
Yeah,
or sort of got in their ear when they mentioned it and said, look, listen, I'm interested in football, or I'd like to cover
yeah,
the rebranding of Twitter, or,
mm,
unless you knock on that door and persevere, it could just pass you by. So like
yeah,
you say, you need to be able to source your own stuff, and you need to make sure that, people hear you, because more
mm,
often than not, if you persevere, if you do persevere with it and you ask in the correct way and they see that you're keen, they'll give it to you.
yeah,
I'm a huge football fan. PA cover Premier League matches. I'm an Arsenal fan.
mm,
They
ditto.
told me,
Yeah,
you can go to Arsenal games. A
yeah,
few weeks later, I was bombarding one of the senior editors with emails saying, look, listen, I'd love to go to an Arsenal game.
yeah,
More often than, within a few weeks, I was sat at the Emirates watching Arsenal,
yeah,
in the
yeah,
press
yeah.
box, surrounded by all these well-respected football journalists.
Mm.
And I wouldn't have got that if I hadn't asked.
Yeah, oh, for sure. Yeah, no, and especially, I think it's such a nice feeling as well. Once it comes off, once the story has come together, like there's a sense of personal pride. Like, I'm the one who found that. Potentially, it would have like slipped right by the editor. They wouldn't have necessarily caught it if I hadn't raised my hand and said, actually, there could be something here that's worth looking at. And if it does really well, especially, that there's a sense of personal pride for yourself that you were the one who found it and brought it to their attention.
Yeah. Yeah, there's nothing more rewarding than that, is there? So,
Mm. Yeah, for sure. And again, like, just to go off what you said, I'm also an Arsenal fan, and I mean, for me personally, it, I think the course is one of the most Arsenal concentrated, Arsenal fan concentrated places I've been in the world. There's about, I think, like 5 or 6 of us, which was really nice. It's normally the minority, unfortunately, but it was really nice to have other Arsenal supporters in one place to actually, well, in some cases commiserate, in some cases, share the pride that we have in supporting, the best football team of all time.
yes.
We'll say
And
that.
you're exactly right, Conor, the
Yeah,
best football team of all
yeah, yeah.
time.
Yeah, or at least we think so. And obviously, if you have the support of your fans, then else opinions matter, I guess, right? For sure. Yeah, I mean, I suppose and to kind of wrap this up on like a similar note to the past few question, but if there's somebody generally who reached out who said, oh, I'm looking to get into journalism, like maybe they've seen your work on PA, they reached out and said, like, how did you manage to do that? Like, could you give me some advice? So, like, what advice would you give to somebody who isn't you, but is looking to try and get into journalism? If that makes sense.
I think forgive me for sort of if I'm repeating myself, but
Yeah, no worries.
um, persevere, keep looking around.
Yeah,
Don't be disheartened if you get rejected by one application. It took me many, many applications to get the job I wanted.
right.
And journalism can be quite unforgiving if you haven't got the very specific tools that they're looking for in the first instance. I would say have faith in your own writing ability, but make sure it's sharp. Make
Yeah.
sure you understand, you have a base understanding of how to form a coherent article, how quotes work. It seems like simple things initially. And you think, well, how can you mess that up? But it's easily done. So understand the building blocks, hone it,
Yeah.
get very good at it, and get very good at reaching out to people and finding stories where there seems like there's very little going on. Because I managed to get my job not through my CV, but through handing in an original piece of work. That's what PA were looking for at the time.
Right. Okay.
So yeah, always be prepared to write something, because a lot of these applications, if they are trying to get into the industry, will be about CVs, but you never know. You might come across one where they're like, okay, great, we like what you've got, we like your experience, now do this for us.
Yeah.
And we want it within X amount of time. So just make sure you're up to date, you're up to scratch with your writing.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to send out emails to people to seek advice.
For
For them,
sure.
people who you might find their emails online, you might come across them, or you might have been told about them through word of mouth.
Yeah.
Reach out, because 99% of the time people are going to read your email and they're going to want to help you get into the industry because they know from their own experience how tricky it is.
Yeah.
Like I say, reach out to people and they will give you, hopefully, the advice that you need.
Hopefully so. Well, yeah, and I suppose that's a lovely note to end on. But thank you again, Harry, so much for taking the time to have this conversation. It's been really great to catch up with you and see you again. And I wish you continued success with PA and everything going forward. All the best.
Thank you, Conor. Thank you for having me on the Journo Links podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you again. I'm really enjoying what you're doing here. I think it's fantastic. It's great. Producing some really engaging media. So thank you. And hopefully I will see you soon.
Hopefully so.